Welcome. The Toronto Raptors general manager Bobby Webster will be meeting with the media shortly, and we'll have you covered, live reaction all the way throughout. Hopefully, don't get any YouTube copyright flags for this. But yes, the Toronto Raptors will be helmed by not Masai Ujiri for the first time in a really long time. So it'll be very interesting to hear what Bobby Webster has to say. Then got a little bit of a notification email an hour ago saying, "Oh, by the way, we know Media Day is in on Monday next week, and that's when Darko and the players will be meeting with the media. But right now, it's Bobby Webster time. So be very curious to hear what he has to say. And look, the Toronto Raptors have a lot of big decisions up ahead right now. Okay, let's just be clear about that. A lot of big decisions. There's an RJ extension potentially. There's a Ochai Abaji extension. Can y'all hear me? All good? It says there's one live viewer. That's impossible. There's 31 now. Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's the RJ extension, the Ochai extension. There's the Gradey Jacoby thing. There's Jonathan Mobo's potential redundancy on the roster with CMB's role, Scotty's role, Brandon Ingram's health. There's so many things that need to be talked about right now. So many things I'll be curious to hear his views on. And he's a really intelligent guy, and he tends to articulate himself pretty well. It's not gonna be, one thing I'll tell you right now, I guarantee I'm gonna miss. I'm gonna miss the flowery language. I'm gonna miss a lot of the emphatic, we want to win in Toronto. So let me give you your dose of Masai Ujiri. We will win in Toronto, man. We will win, and we will win a lot more than we did last year. And yeah, I mean, I look forward to hearing what Darko has to say about his roster, what he's seen. And look, there's some surprise elements on this roster, right? There's people that we haven't really heard from for most of the offseason. Jacoby Walter has been relatively silent. He hasn't really been posting a lot on social media. Obviously, followed Jacoby, know his trainer pretty well. And so, yeah, I've been hearing bits and pieces about, what he's been doing, what he's been up to. And he's in for a really big season. And now I happened to catch Esfandiar Barhani and Eric Kareen on the NBA Athletic Show breaking down the Raptors. And Kareen had a very different expectation of what the Raptors rotation would look like. And he said, I want to paraphrase. He said Jacoby Walter will probably be on the outside looking in, trying to get minutes. So he'll have to compete for minutes. I don't think it's going to be that dire for Jacoby Walter. I think it's going to be pretty automatic. He's going to get minutes on this team. I think he's a very big priority for this team. I think maybe if you're looking at roster gaps and roster holes, I think there's a couple of major concerns, 3 concerns, really. Number 1, is Sandro Mamukelashvili the answer at backup 5? Because obviously Jakob Poeltl, your extension, what you've invested in him, that's telling me you believe, here we are. That's telling me that you believe that he is going to be the starting guy, right? I'm going to raise the volume here. Here we go. Mike Gate situations.
Are all of your players healthy and available to participate in day 1 of training camp?
Yes, all players are healthy and available.
So smug.
Were you specifically asking about anyone individual?
No. It just seems like a thing we should ask, given various news around the league.
Sorry for a little delay. I had a big Terry Fox run this morning. So.
Bobby, does this? How much of this team, as constructed, feels like a team you would put your stamp on as a general manager?
Yeah, I mean,
that's tough.
Heavily involved in all the decisions that sort of brought us here. So yeah, I mean, I think probably the most recent piece is Brandon, right? And so been big fans of Brandon since I think he was in a draft that we had a lottery pick, if I remember. So we scouted him pretty well. Colin, obviously, we had 2 years to watch him. So, and then all the other guys from before. But yeah, probably the 2 biggest, the most recent additions, Brandon and Colin, feel very much like, decisions that, heavily involved in.
Well, I'm sure you guys
I will not let the Sandro Mamukelashvili stray fly, but okay.
Guys are still going to be prioritizing growth and development I think it's safe to say that expectations are a little bit different this year in that the results are going to matter more than the last couple of years. What are your expectations and what would a successful season for this team look like to you?
I think listen, Darko's great at this. Win the day, 1% better, no finish line. I think you have to build a team that way. If you have a specific goal in mind, a specific win where you want to enter, I just don't know if that's sort of the best way to build, especially a young group. These guys, they're sort of, when they lock in, that day-to-day improvement is what ends up resulting in, being in the playoffs or being in the play-in. We won 30 games last year, so I don't think there's any sort of illusions of, expectations of this number of wins or this playoff seed. But truly, we'll see. You'll see in training camp. You'll see as preseason involves. We feel like the summer's been incredible for these guys. Brandon's healthy. We have a starting group that we really haven't ever seen play together. And Darko's in year 3. So I think we have a lot of things in our favor, a lot of things that, suggest we'll be competitive. But we haven't put that full season together yet. And I think that's the challenge for this group is, from the first game there at Atlanta, can they be competitive? Can they turn back? Can they fly back around? Can they play Friday night? Can they play Saturday night? Can you do that on a consistent basis? And then we can have the conversation of where do we think this team will be or where do we think this team can be at the end of the season?
Is there anything about Brandon's game, maybe like an underrated component of it that you think makes him a better basketball fit with this roster than might appear on paper?
I'm going to guess he's going to talk about isolation scoring and passing, but let's see.
I think the shot creation obviously is clear, right? He's one of the few guys who can go get his own shot, but also can go get a pretty efficient shot on his own. And I think that's something that we've lacked a bit in prior years. I think he's sort of like when they say comic, he's like a hooper's hooper. I think people that watch him and people that have seen film on him, high level of skill, 3-level scorer, not all that interested in what's going on off the court, not all that interested in, what people say about him. We had another guy that was sort of like that, but this guy, he just loves playing basketball. And I think it's fun to watch him. It's fun to watch him warm up. It's fun to watch him play. We're excited to see him.
That's the second time that Bobby Webster has compared Brandon Ingram to Kawhi Leonard. In last year's conference, he did the same thing. So interesting.
What's your message been to Scotty this offseason? And what are your expectations for him up to this year?
Continue to lead. I think he's growing up. Obviously, had a baby, so everybody grows up when you have a kid. I think the baselines for Scotty, just met with him yesterday, are his defense, his energy, his rebounding, keeping the team together. Right, the starting unit will be interesting to see how they mesh. The scoring, I think, comes. It can come easily for him when he gets early seals, when he attacks the rim, when he gets to the free throw line. So you don't want to put so much pressure on his scoring. It's sort of all the other stuff, and I think that's a really high floor for Scotty.
How much or how little has your day-to-day changed in this newish role going into camp?
Well, you combine the role with the new ownership, right? And I think that's probably the two things that have changed the most. Like anything, it's probably more of a relationship with ownership and sort of understanding what they're looking for, educating them.
I don't mean to do this, but he's not someone who touches his face a lot, but he got really, it was a very interesting tell right there. I'm curious to see if he does it again.
Board meetings obviously feel a little bit different and, things are changing up there, but from the day-to-day, what goes on in here, very little.
What kind of things would you like to imprint on this team under your leadership?
Good question, Doug. So there's a balance of, we have continuity, right? And so you don't want to sort of get away from that, but you also don't sort of want to be afraid to make change. And I think that's sort of where we are. And you guys know me, it's not my natural personality. I'm not going to come out here and sort of make, sweeping statements and, pound my fist on the table. So it's really still an assessment. I think the tough part is we didn't get to see this team play. I think if we get to see this team play, then hopefully I and our group will more quickly be able to make those decisions. But it's really difficult before you see Brandon with this group or before you see Colin play or before you see sort of Darko have a team like this to coach to say, okay, we're going to make a ton of changes. But I do think what hopefully you'll see it as I evaluate the team and our group evaluates the team is we won't be afraid to make change. And I think you've seen that the 12 years I've been here before. We're going to not think the same way as the rest of the NBA. We're going to not, sort of follow the leader in that sense. And so I think what you've come to expect and know from us, which is we're going to take the player we like. We're not going to take the player that everybody thinks we're going to take, and we'll make the trade that we want to make and not what everyone else says. And so that theme, I think, will always carry through.
What do you think of Colin and where he fits into a young team, but a lot of guys who played will play ahead of him. You may not have to play a lot. Is that a good situation for rookies?
I think for sure. I think him, very rarely do you see a rookie come in and impact the game in a positive way. I think the one area he can do, and is probably the best way for rookies, is on the defensive end. He's incredibly disruptive defensively, and we've seen that here in September. You saw it in college, you saw it in summer league. So I think that probably would be the incentive for the coaches to put him in the game. But he's got a long ways to go. I think he's, still got a 20-year-old body. He's still getting used to, he hasn't even been on a road trip yet in the NBA. But I think, you'll see on the defensive end as well here where he'll really make his impact, and I think where he could play right away.
You said you need to see this team play, and
Yeah.
obviously coming off 30 wins, there's a lot of a burden of proof, but you know the financial situation of the team as well. Is there actually more of an urgency to assess the team than there might be in a lot of cases for a team that's sort of building up from outside of the playoffs?
The financial piece, I've seen that this summer. I don't even know how big of a story that one is. I think obviously that those who know, like, you can make one, the likelihood that this team is the exact same team by the end of the year is probably zero. And then put on top of that with, sort of one move you can get under the tax. So I don't see that as the urgent piece. I think maybe your earlier point was like, the basketball is always the urgent piece, right? If we don't come out and we're not competitive and we're having, then it forces us to evaluate it. But I don't think it's exacerbated by any other outside timeline or financial pressure. I think we are fortunate to be in one of the biggest, most lucrative markets in the NBA. And so I don't see the financial piece, affecting us.
I disagree completely. Rodgers will be very financially motivated to cut tax, especially if this team does not prove itself to be a, contender, and it's not a contender. So you're not paying the tax for a non-contender. That's been true through all of MLSE. The Raptors have dipped into the tax in 2019. That was it. So if this team comes out and they're 14-4, maybe there will be some internals saying, okay, we'll make the money back on the revenue, but being a tax team has huge end of year implications in terms of the benefits you receive back from the league. So there's no chance the Raptors are going to be a tax team. They're going to cut salaries somewhere. It's probably going to be Ochai or RJ or somebody.
Speaking of the financial situation, you guys extended Jakob Poeltl this summer, but there's also Ochai, who's extension eligible, and RJ ends up being extension eligible in October. Have discussions started to happen?
Obviously, we'll keep that stuff private. I think with the Yak one, which we got, we're able to sort of keep this year, next year flat, and sort of when we had more flexibility in the future, increase it there. And the other two guys, obviously, we'll let it play out, but we're not going to discuss any of that publicly.
Clearly, you guys have been impressed with what you've seen so far from Darko as the leader of a rebuilding team. Talked about maybe shifting expectations a little bit this year. What do you expect to learn about him as a head coach this season in this situation?
I think any year you're an NBA head coach, you learn a ton, right? So the first year, I remember even talking to Nick Nurse, is sort of, what do you learn off the court? There's so many things off the court, right? Sort of scheduling, how do you get things in line? Darko has been a head coach previously, whether it was in the G League and International, so he had that. Then you have personalities, and so how are you managing the personalities? Those personalities change every single year. But I do think this year, not a ton new personalities. Obviously, the starting group is very familiar. We bring in Sandro, we bring in Colin. So I think it's a bit of stability. I told someone the other day, even on our staffing side, we haven't brought in anybody new. And so there's a bit of that where I think for Darko is really settling in. He had one big summer of development. This is the second big summer of development. As you guys know, that was one of the big reasons why we hired him. And so, I think this is there's no pressure on him in that sense. I think obviously he has his own expectations of himself, and you guys will talk to him on Monday. But he knows he can coach. He knows he's incredibly well, communicating with these players. They all know their roles. They all know, what the expectations are from them. I think it's just another year of growth with him too.
With RJ, he's been in trade rumors over the course of the summer, and he was the leading scorer for this team. You mentioned Brandon's importance as a scorer. How do you see his role on the team going forward, and what are his expectations like?
I think with RJ, we're talked a lot about his efficiency, and so his catch and shoot continue to improve, getting to the free throw line. Don't expect him to see as many double teams, as much sort of attention. So now he gets to attack some closeouts on the weak side, and I think all the things he's really good at: getting to the rim, catch and shoot. So I think the more you see that, and the more efficient he is, the more valuable he'll be. And then listen, we push him on the other end too for defense and rebounding, and he knows that. So
You had a really solid group of rookies last season, in Jamal and Jacoby and all of them. As this team gets a little bit more healthy this season, how will their roles change within the system?
So
That's a Darko question.
5 from last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun group. They love hanging out with each other. I think when you can get them to let their hair down a bit online, you see sort of their personalities come out, and now is another year of it. So probably people know Jamal hosted a group of them down in Austin, so that's cool to see. Listen, it's really hard to be good as a rookie. I think it's less hard to be good as a sophomore. So they're no longer sort of the shiny new toy, and I think that's always a good. It's a good experience for them, to say, hey, I'm not the first round pick, or I'm not second round pick, and there's someone coming behind me and pushing. And so we also want, it's not just sort of fun and games, is you have competition behind you. You have to build on last year. You weren't that good. And so how do you continue to get better? I think they love doing it as a group, and it's fun. But they're no longer rookies.
You talked about CMB and going on a road trip. You mentioned that you want to see this team play consistently through the dregs of the season. I think a lot of lip service is given to the war of attrition, but from the outside perspective, it seems like most decision-making is based on talent. How do you feel about the talent of the roster right now?
That's a good one. I think the talent level is high, but we still have to see the fit. And I think that's sort of what everyone is probably waiting to see and has been waiting for a while. So we're waiting right there with you. Specifically with Garrett Collin, I think he's high level talent. I think the defensive instincts and versatility is really special, and it stood out. Stood out to us in the draft, but I think we have enough talent.
I want to ask you personally, in the course of this job search that took place this summer, what were your conversations like with the new ownership? What were they looking for in particular, and how do you think sort of they settled on you in this position?
I'm not privy to all of that. I think, let's think back. So we have the draft, we have free agency, summer league. It was a bit more of an informal process. I sort of met all of the, lead characters. There's a new, obviously, leadership. There's a new board. There's a new ownership group. And so a lot of it was more informally, sitting with them, having them to get to know me. Obviously, with Edward and Tony, I've been here 12 years, so they know me. I think maybe more on a personal level, sort of, who I am, where I come from, sort of what I believe in. So I think that felt that. Keith, we had the benefit of having the year previously, but having more sort of day-to-day weekly conversations with him has been really interesting and really good for me to learn. He comes from a huge sports background, not necessarily a basketball background, but he's built teams. He's obviously been part of, the Toronto sports scene, so he knows that. But it wasn't sort of a formal do this X, Y, and Z. It was much more of meet this person, go to dinner, go to their office and meet with them.
Can I also ask you about?
Doesn't seem super pleased about this entire situation. And I will say this, if this goes very, very poorly, heads will roll, trades will go, and he will be on the hot seat very quickly.
Yeah.
Masai as well. Obviously, you worked with Masai very closely. He brought you on as assistant GM and promoted you multiple times. Did you get any feedback from him in this process, and sort of what you learned from Masai?
Yeah, Masai is incredibly supportive. He wants us all to succeed, whether it's Jeff or Teresa or myself, and I think that's not always easy in those positions. And I think for him to be incredibly supportive and obviously I kept him up to date on the process, and he's very supportive. But I think when you look back on it, it was a really good pairing, and I guess maybe a kid from Africa and a kid Hawaii, it sort of worked really well for a while. And so for him to sort of have that support behind me as I sort of move on is great.
Bobby, is it strange not having Masai to refer to or kind of consult with on the day-to-day?
I can still if I need to. Yeah. I think, for as you guys know, Masai is incredibly intense, inspirational, love to.
Little slip there. Masai's still running things. Rumor mill, be alert. No, look, I think it's pretty obvious that Masai Ujiri is not a petty person, right? So if Bobby Webster needs to be like, how do you feel about making this trade for this player? How do you think that's going to be? That's a conversation they can still have, right? For the next year, Masai is still, he's not general manager of another team, president of another team. There's no conflict of interest here. He's got other interests, but he's still technically being paid by the Raptors. Just because Bobby is the head honcho here, I think there's a 1-year bleed over with all good organizations where you have that ability, right? Now, I've never been president of a company or whatever, but, I've been the founder, and I've also been president of a fraternity. And, for the first 6-7 months of my presidency, I was always able to lean back to the former president and say, well, how would you do this? How would you do that? That's the closest I've ever gotten to it. It's kind of sad. that the closest I've ever gotten to managing, you know, a major company like this is managing 25 people, but that's pretty much how it is, you know. And you know, when we were doing a dog walking company, like when we had one manager transfer for another manager, there was always a 3-month consultation period where, you know, you could ask questions about how they did their books, how they dealt with client sheets, whether they have old forms. So yeah, this is you know, still, I don't want to say this is still Masai's team, but Masai is the guy who put every single person on this roster. And until Bobby makes a trade, you know, and I just don't suspect it's a good thing that their relationship was as good as it was. So now Bobby doesn't feel some need to like one up Masai, right? Like I'm going to undo his moves. Interestingly enough, and I want to say this, it's a little bit like the Brian Colangelo transfer to Power to Masai, where, you know, Brian Colangelo remained relatively involved, right? He was still there, right? So yeah, I think that's important. And in fact, you know, and Brian Colangelo gets a lot of slander for this. Brian was the one who suggested Masai. One, he brought Masai to Toronto as the assistant general manager. And then when he lost the job, it was him who went to Tim Lawicki and said, you know, Masai Ujiri in Denver is really great. So yeah, like, and, you know, ultimately it was Bobby, you know, sorry, it was Brian Colangelo's guy, you know, DeMar DeRozan that netted you Kawhi Leonard. It was Brian Colangelo's trade for Kyle Lowry that netted you the guy that you eventually ended up winning a championship with as your leader, which is Kyle Lowry. So I just think that it's really important that, you know, there's a smooth transfer of power, and it seems like there will be here.
You give a good motivational speak, so we'll probably miss those, but it's also a great time for us to sort of spread our wings as well.
Les
Brandon
Brown.
obviously didn't play a lot last year, has had his ups and downs with health. Do you envision any sort of load management plan with him? Is he going to be playing back-to-backs, or is this more something where he's all systems go?
There's been any, you know, limitation so far. I think it was an ankle sprain, which is, you know, maybe different than, you know, having a surgery or something like that. But, you know, we'll see how preseason goes. We'll see how he responds to, you know, playing 32 minutes a night, 35 minutes a night. So maybe the jury's out there, but no current plans on Brandon.
There's a lot of, I guess, potential rotation players on this roster. In your experience, what does the level of competition within roster do to help a team take the next step?
It's good.
I think it's hugely important. I think it's something we probably missed, you know, as we sort of started this rebuild. We sort of didn't have a lot of young talent in the pipeline. You know, obviously everyone wants to bring up the bench mob, but I think people forgot that, you know, Bebe and Norm and other players were in and out of that second unit. So, you know, we think we have 11, 12 rotation guys, and I think that third group always wants to push the second group. The second group always wants to push the first group. And I think that dynamic worked well for us. And having a little bit of looking over your shoulder, I think, has been good. And I think that's what we have now. And so if you feel a couple of the footsteps, I think it probably brings out the best in you.
How much of that is on Darko to like make the right decisions on the court, and then the top-down view of you guys saying, we like this guy, we think he should have a, you know, a decent run at this position? Like, how does that meld together now?
Yeah, that's the job. I think that's why you're in constant communication, right? We don't draft Colin without talking to Darko, right? We don't sort of sign Sandra without talking to our coaching staff. And so all of those discussions hopefully have happened prior to the decisions on the court, you know. And so once they roll the ball out there, obviously the coaching staff makes those decisions. But I would say hopefully it's not a case where we're not on the same page with them as far as like how we see the player or how we see the development. And that's just sort of a sign of a good organization or a good company in general.
How does Gradey fit in this year? Like, obviously a big start last year, then kind of things didn't go as well. I mean, how does he fit into everything, and what are you expecting out of him?
Yeah, I think consistency with Gradey. I think you guys will see him. He's bigger, stronger, and sort of that's the natural, you know, jump for these players. I think the shooting obviously unlocks a lot for not only him on the court, but obviously the team is competitiveness on the defensive end. But yeah, he's a third-year guy, and so I think, you know, you want continued expectations. But I think from him is just a fully consistent season and not have as many ups and downs.
On the Thunder, obviously beat the Pacers in 7 in the finals. Were there any lessons, especially in terms of maybe team building strategies, or even just on the court strategies that you saw that the Pacers did well or the Thunder did well that you would like to sort of incorporate here?
Yeah, if we could be as good as the finals team. You know, we always say it's copycat. You know, you think back to.
It's worth noting that there have been some reports over the last couple of months that Bobby Webster was not necessarily on board with trading Pascal Siakam. Now, again, this is possibly just PR, right? Oh, well, the guy we just hired didn't want to trade the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. So, yeah, interesting question.
When we won, and then everyone wanted this sort of big two-way wings, and then, Then it became, before that it was a big three. I think probably what OKC did really well was the defensive stuff, right? I mean, it was very clear watching them play. The sort of attacking style on defense was really played well, not only to their personnel, but I think obviously on to win on the court. And then I think Indiana was just fun to watch. I think anyone who watched that team and was rooting for them, there's so many unexpected moments. And so the fan in me or the fan in any of us, I think really enjoyed that Pacers run. And, to get to a game 7, obviously the injury was unfortunate. I think that was probably as fun as basketball as we've seen in a while.
Speaking of injuries, there's been a lot, obviously, in the past, obviously with the playoffs, and the Raptors are kind of known for having a pretty good system of trying to avoid that. So what goes into kind of the conversations maybe on your level when it comes to trying to prevent some of those injuries that we were seeing kind of in the late playoffs last year?
I don't know if you can prevent injuries and be, a billionaire. That's what I always tell sort of young kids as I get into that. For us, I think we try to take as long-term of approach. So, when the season ends, unfortunately this past year in April, there's a plan to get to October 1, right? And I think that maybe hopefully is something that we've sort of not initially developed, but something that we've prioritized over the years is sort of what does a full off season look like as opposed to what does next week look like. And so just to take that big picture of how do we get to October 1 with guys healthy and with guys ready for a season.
You just mentioned that, team building is a moving target, and obviously with the way that the CBA has been structured over the last couple of seasons, you're now seeing it shake out in terms of team building decisions. What do you think has changed over the last couple of years in terms of what teams are prioritizing around the league?
You see it as the depth, right? Having a lot of low cost depth on your team, it's really going to be hard to package the max guys together and then also fill out your roster. Not that I think that doesn't work sort of if you want to go for it for a year or two, but I think if you want sort of more long-term viability and success, you're probably going to have a deeper team and have some guys on some reasonably priced deals to actually fit in those max guys.
Thanks, Bobby.
Okay, so takeaways. I think this could be an important way to discuss everything we heard today. So the Bobby Webster era is underway, and I will say this. The Raptors roster, especially in light of the contracts we're seeing signed by other teams, right? The contract that we're seeing Josh Giddey going for, Jonathan Kuminga, Kobe White, what Quentin Grimes wants, what Cam Thomas just signed for. I'm looking at every single contract that was signed this offseason, with the exception of Dennis Schroeder making $15 million a year because that's the Kings, and the Kings are insane. For the most part, I'm thinking there is very little chance that Jakob Poeltl, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett exceed the value of their contracts. Exceeding would be ambitious and probably crazy. If they can come within 80% of meeting that contract value, that would be a very successful season for me. If Emmanuel Quickley can be roughly a $25 million player, so that a $26 million player, I think that's good. That's very good for a $32 million player. With Scotty and Ingram, it just comes down to ascent and injuries. I don't think there's a world in which Scotty is ever going to be a negative asset on this contract. Obviously, right now, a lot has been made about what his role is going to be offensively. Is he going to be the type of guy who's going to take, a leap, 25 points per game? Is he going to continue getting fed mid-post, isolation possessions and pull-up jumpers? From what I'm understanding, that's not what Scotty's focus was from the Raptors. But here's, I'll share this with y'all, right? The Raptors don't always know what the hell they're doing with Scotty Barnes, right? Like last year, I heard through the grapevine, through one of the assistant coaches, that there was going to be a really strong emphasis. And this is last year, not this year. Last year, that there was going to be a really strong emphasis to cut out mid-range from Scotty's game. And then we saw a season where they literally went all in on, Scotty mid-range. So it's like, we'll see. But in terms of what Scotty's been told to work on a lot over the summer, I think that's not leading me to believe that they're expecting him to be their featured scorer this year or, create a million possessions. But that doesn't mean that work isn't being done, right? So anyways, I think with the Ingram thing, it's easier when your reputation around the league is that you're like a really good scorer, but you just can't win and stay healthy. I think being a really good scorer will immediately alleviate a lot of the doubts that people have about Brandon Ingram. Can he be healthy and can he continue to do what he does? And if he's winning in that context and he's the leading scorer, then I think that contract pretty easily justifies itself. At which point you could also think to yourself, we're not married to Ingram. He's on a 2-year +1 deal. If at the trade deadline there's an offer for Devin Booker or something like that, and maybe the Suns are willing to accept Brandon Ingram for Devin Booker and we throw in a couple of picks and a young player, maybe Ingram is the type of player who can land you the star that you really want, right? Or he is the star you really want, and you're really happy to have him. We'll see. I think a lot will change over the first 10 games. I found it interesting to say, a couple things I found interesting. One, saying that Gradey is much stronger and that you'll all see. Doesn't seem like they've sold on Gradey at all. It doesn't seem like he's in the same category as RJ and Ochai, which is pack your bags, you're on your way out. So it'll be interesting to see how that wing rotation between Ochai, Gradey, Jacoby, and RJ shakes out. And I think initially the job will be RJ's to lose. Obviously, the minutes will be RJ's to lose. If RJ plays well, RJ will play 32, 33, 34 minutes. But if RJ doesn't fit with that lineup, you're going to see a slide in his minutes because, again, as much as you want to preserve that trade value, you're not nudging the trade value because unlike Scotty and unlike Ingram, RJ has never been seen as worth $27 million. So the amount of work that you have to do to prove to people that he's suddenly worth it, then garner trade interest in him. I'm telling you, man, based on what players like him are getting paid, he's going to be overpaid even if he comes out and scores 20 points per game on solid efficiency. So it's just a little bit difficult, right? It's a little bit difficult to get all that. The other thing I found interesting was him saying that they have 11 rotation pieces. 11. I think it's a fair question to ask whether some of those 11 players are really rotation players. One, would they be rotation players on a good team? Which is to say, would Jamal Shead be a rotation player in OKC? Or would he be a rotation player right now in Indiana? Ahead of who? TJ McConnell? No. Ahead of Andrew Nemhard? No. Those are second and third string point guards. So your second string point guard is probably behind their third string point guard. If you're talking about winning, you're going to have to do a few things. And one of those things is you're going to have to become very, very, I don't want to say critical. I don't want to say judicious. I don't want to say ruthless, but you're going to have to pick a timeline. You're going to have to pick a priority. And there's nothing that's stopping Jamal Shead from developing in the G League. There's nothing that's stopping Colin Murray Boyles or Gradey Dick or Jacoby Walter or literally anybody from developing in the G League. But to me, this team is a solid 2-for-2 trade away from competing, right? And that 2-for-2 trade factors into the other point that Bobby made, which is about the reasonable contracts, right? You've got RJ Barrett extension eligible. He's probably thinking, I've played better than my last contract, so I should get a contract increase. Problem is, can't afford a contract increase. So you're at an impasse with RJ. If he plays well, you can't afford him. If he doesn't play well, you can't move him. And regardless of how he plays, he may not fit anyways. This is tough because I actually think RJ is going to have a really good season. I just don't know if it can materialize to winning. And he's the big matzo ball in all of this. Because if you take him out of this, let's just say you replace RJ with two $13 million players. Let's just say you replace them with two relatively okay, let's make a trade here. Let me just make a trade for the hypothetical. I'm sorry I'm bringing him back here, but he's going to come back. Dennis Schroeder and Malik Monk for RJ Barrett and Ochai Agbaji. That evens out your roster. It moves a $27 million player and a soon-to-be probably north of $12 million player, so combined salary around 40 to about 35. So about 18 for Malik, I think 17, 18 for Malik, 15 for Dennis. I think that evens out your roster completely, and you get two rotation players who can come off the bench. Maybe Jacoby is a spot starter, maybe Malik is a spot starter. My point is, you're a better team, but you can make a very solid argument RJ is better than Malik Monk. You can make an argument that RJ is better than Dennis Schroeder. I could make an argument those two guys are better, actually. But regardless, it doesn't matter. The point is, you need to replace a starter and a fringe rotation player, which, again, apparently we have 11. You need to replace one starter, Like, it could be IQ. I'm totally cool with it being IQ. It could be Yuck. It could be, it's not going to be Scotty or BI, but it could be RJ. And one of those fringe rotation guys. It could be Mobo. It could be CMB. It could be Gradey. Probably going to be Ochai. Could be Jamal. I don't know. One of those guys. So replace two of those guys with two middle players, and your roster will be a hell of a lot more balanced. And ideally, two players who can dribble, pass, shoot, and penetrate. Ideally, two players who can play the backcourt positions, because you're very front court loaded right now. I think the most ideal and optimal guarding position, because I believe that old Larry Brown quote of "you are who you guard." The most optimal matchup for Scotty Barnes is a small forward. That's the most optimal. The most optimal defensive matchup for Brandon Ingram is a small forward. The most optimal matchup for Jonathan Mobo is a small forward. The most optimal matchup for, you just have a whole bunch of guys who can play 2, play 3, play 4, but all ultimately are threes. Ochai is a 3. Gradey is a 3. RJ is a 3. Scotty is a 3. BI is a 3. You know, it's funny because I remember there was a time or an era in Raptors basketball where we couldn't find a small forward. We went through Lamont Murray. You know, we went through Hito Turkoglu. We went through DeMar Carroll. Like, my God, we just couldn't find a small forward, bro. We had Pedro for a minute. We had Sean Marion for like half a season. But for the most part, small forward was just a position we could never figure out. You know, we plugged in it when Jamario Moon. We've had a lot of small forwards. I mean, shout outs to Mo Peep, but he was more like a guard. My point is, we've never really had like a really great big wing small forward. Even when the Raptors won a championship, it's ironic that they traded a shooting guard for a small forward in Kawhi Leonard. And now I could argue you have like 7 small forwards on your roster. And yeah, sure, Scotty can play the 4. Mobile can play the 4. Is that their optimal position? Probably not. You know, I think you need some better guards. I think you need a few less redundant wings. I think while Ochai and RJ have value in and of themselves and individually they have value, I wonder if their value is a little bit redundant. Like, Ochai is great because he's a defender. Is he a better defender than Mobo? No. Is he a better defender than CMB? No. He's a good shooter. Is he a more valuable shooter offensively, all some things considered? Is he a better shooter than Jamison Battle? I don't think so. Is he a better shooter? So you get my point, right? Like, Ochai is redundant on this roster. And while I don't mind roster redundancy, Aaron Wiggins, anyone, I don't mind roster redundancy. When you have roster holes, roster redundancy to me feels harsh. You have roster holes. You have, until further notice, you have an absence of a backup point guard. I understand you have RJ, Scotty, guys like this who can plug in at backup point guard if Jamal Shead struggles with a jump shot. But you probably feel a lot better if you have Malik Monk and Dennis Schroeder. Point being, backup center. You have Sandro Mamukelashvili. I'm very high on Sandro, but I'm also kind of aware that, you know, we've been high on players that have been signed in this ilk before and watched them completely shit the bed. Juancho Hernan-Gomez, anyone, right? So there's a chance that Sandro gets to Toronto and just fucking can't shoot. You know what I mean? Whew. Trey Jones. How about this? Ayo Dosunmu and Patrick Williams for RJ Barrett. That's the deal. To me, that's a deal. Ayo plugs in at the backup 1. Patrick Williams plugs in as like a backup 3-4. And yeah, RJ is a better player than both of them, 100%. You know, but once again, the same spirit of rounding out your roster, right? Ayo is a good player. You do that deal for Ayo in spite of Patrick Williams. And then you pray that Scotty's relationship with Pat Will, the fact that he's a better defender than RJ, just kind of smooths out your roster. You just, you know, and it's funny because, you know, the more I watch the Minnesota Lynx, the more I compare Scotty and Nafisa Collier, the more I realize that if you really, really want to do this, and I'm going to do this in a video breakdown as well, but one of the things that I was doing in that video breakdown was I was like looking at the Minnesota Lynx roster and I was like, what do they have that the Raptors don't have, right? Well, all their bigs can shoot. So if you want to run through a Scotty Barnes and a Brandon Ingram, your bigs better be able to shoot. So I appreciate that we have Sandro. You probably need one more big who can shoot, but also one who can defend the paint, because their bigs can also, most of their bigs can also defend the paint. They have one of the better shot blockers in the WNBA, and their guards can get to the paint at will. So yeah, those players don't grow on trees. You're not going to get, Ja Morant and De'Aaron Fox. But can you get like something close to a 2023 Terry Rozier on this team? Can you get that sort of spark plug engine? Now, understand, Jamal Shead is that archetype. He's a fast guard. He can beat he can beat off the live dribble. He can be very, very quick in transition. Jamal Shead is great. If he can shoot, he'd be great. If he can get a mid-range jump shot off, if he can get that floater range stuff together, if he can start finishing a little bit better around the rim, he's great, man. I love Jamal Shead. He might be a little bit away from it though. He's not Malik Monk. He's not Dennis Schroeder. He's not going to be at that level. So Malik and Dennis is like the archetype. It's obviously not the two players that I'm necessarily gung-ho over, but that's the archetype. That's what I would trade some of this wing depth for, is I would get a true stretch big who can block some shots. So again, Ulrich Shamshi, fully realized. Jonathan Mobo, fully realized. If he can shoot, Lou Dort, taller Lou Dort, and Jamal Shead, fully realized, and you got a great squad. If these guys were just further ahead, you would probably have a very complete basketball team. At which point, probably don't have minutes for RJ anyways, because those guys being better. Colin Murray-Boyle's another one, right? Also, like, I think CMB, he said, Bobby Webster said, he has the body of a 20-year-old. Fundamentally disagree. The fact that he was able to dominate the SEC last year is precisely because he does not have the body of a 20-year-old. He has more like the body of like a 24, 25-year-old. He's going to body some dudes, man. Like, if the Raptors, and I believe they're going to have an open scrimmage in Calgary, we're very curious to watch RJ Barrett face off against CMB in like that second unit. And this is very important, by the way. Your second unit should push your first unit in individual, settings, competition, roster depth, all that stuff, but also in practice. Like, Fred VanVleet sharpened Kyle Lowry. Pascal Siakam sharpened DeMar DeRozan and OG Anunoby. Like, Jakob Poeltl sharpened Jonas Valanciunas. Like, there is a real element to depth sharpening starters. And when your depth just is so bad, there's a natural human element to get your foot off the gas. There's also a natural element to rhythm. You have ferocious defenders. So here's my question to you. If you are RJ Barrett and you can score on Jonathan Mobo, right? Jonathan Mobo and Colin Murray-Boyles on the second unit, which starting unit is actually scaring you? You're dealing with length all the time. I remember in that interview when we did with Scotty's trainer, where we asked him why did he go from the Sharks to Montverde to the Eagles, and he said he just wanted to play with size. That was a really big motivating factor. He wanted to play with bigger players. Why? Because you play against bigger players, you get tougher angles, you get more realistic angles. The worst thing you can do if you have, and this is unsolicited advice, if you have a kid who's really great at basketball and they're like 5'10" in grade 6, the worst thing for them right now is if they're truly good. I don't mean like, oh, my kid is good because they're my kid. No, if they're actually good and they're 5'10" in grade 6 right now, and you have some belief that they're going to end up around 6'2", 6'3", get them facing up against grade 9s and grade 10s right now, because those angles are fucking up their game, right? So you need to get early exposure to size, to length, to strength. You need to get beat up a little bit, and you need to just get the right angles to the rim. And I think, when a team is really good defensively, which the Raptors second unit with Jacoby, Ochai, Jamal, it's just a very feisty, tough group. That group is going to sharpen Scotty. It's going to sharpen BI. It's going to give them like a really good rhythm to play against long, active, tenacious, high motor, young defenders. And because of that, I think you're going to just be a much better team for it. So, some understated stuff that often, goes underappreciated about why it matters to have, and again, think about what I'm saying. The Dennis Schroeder and Malik Monk thing. Imagine those guys were on your bench right now. Imagine Jacoby's a starter and your bench is Dennis, Malik, CMB, Sandro and Mobo, or Sandro and Gradey. My bad. Man, there's actually a chance the bench could actually whoop some ass here. I think the bench is now going to push Jacoby as well on the other end, right? So it's maybe a little bit too beneficial to the starters to have a super defensively slanted bench. It could also be really great for the starting lineup's defensive awareness, because again, defense is like at least 55% of basketball for me. It'd be great if Scotty and BI and all these guys got a lot of effort, got a lot of practice defensively, being able to guard like really quick guards, really smart players. That second unit as a unit is very offensively deprived. They are very woefully unqualified to face off against that first unit offensively. But again, so iron sharpens iron. I wish it would go a little bit more the other way. And again, if NBA contracts weren't a thing, NBA politics weren't a thing, you can solve this entire roster crunch with one very simple move. Move RJ to the bench. He becomes a 16 point per game sixth man like Manu Ginobili, and you really have a lot more roster balance. Unfortunately, he's not going to do it. They're not going to do it. His agent's not going to allow it. And so you are where you are right now, and you pray for the best, and you hope that his catch and shoot stuff and his transition stuff and how much, they intend to run is just going to make him that much more efficient, that his defense is going to be a little bit better. Media day is on Monday. The players will obviously meet. We'll hear from RJ what he plans on doing, what he thinks his future in Toronto is. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of fluff. There's going to be a lot of, I want to be here and all that stuff. But his agent knows. His agent knows right now that there isn't a contract offer at the moment on the table that matches what they want. Ochai is looking at his team, drafting wing after wing after wing, and realizing that his next stop may be somewhere else as well. When you lose, these things matter a lot. Now, Ochai is not just able to distract himself by the fact that, hey, I'm probably going to get a bit of a boost because I'm on a winning team. When you lose, everything falls apart. Last year, the Raptors lost, but everybody got to play. So you get to chalk it up to development and everyone's okay with it. That's how you maintain it. This year, everybody's not playing. So you really can't afford to lose. Because now if you lose, now you're going to stress test your locker room heavy because you have a lot of young guys who are looking at their situation and saying, I don't have a contract for next year, and I'm on a team that's 6 games under 500. It's really hard to sacrifice when you're losing. So I'll say this, the Raptors have to win this year. I think they're going to win. And, let's see if Scotty surprises us this year, man. I know I made some projections, yesterday in that video about what I think his role will be. And yeah, that's true. Unless he comes out and he takes his first 13 pull-up jump shots and he hits 8 of them. And now, if I'm Darko Rajakovic, I got to rethink some stuff, right? So yeah, it'll be a work in progress over the first 2 weeks. Obviously, 2-3 weeks. We'll see how it goes. But I can't wait for training camp. I can't wait for preseason. The Raptors face off against the Denver Nuggets in 10 days. 10 days. There's 30 days in September. And on October 6th, we'll have you covered. It's October 6th, October 8th, October 10th. Every single one of those days, we'll have you covered with the post-game live. Salute to all of you. And Q-Bone, Pen, have you watched the new Jamal Shead video? Yes, sir. With Frigga, yeah, I have. Which is interesting because Frigga was on Player's Choice. So know him a little bit, which is pretty cool, or at least know of him quite a bit. So I'm not saying like we're friends or anything, but yeah, it was cool. It was cool to watch Jamal Shead, play against regular hoopers. Jump shot still looks pretty much the same, bro. It might go in a little bit more, but yeah, and it's kind of curious how even in an exhibition game at a park with old friends, that Jamal Shead is still trying to do the right thing. Bro is such a smart basketball player, and he's just so freaking athletic. Like, he's so underrated as an athlete. I almost think if Jamal Shead was like 6'4", he would have been like a top 3 pick. That's the gap. 6 foot, 45th pick. 6'4", top 5 pick. That's the gap. He's a really good basketball player. I'm really rooting for all these guys, man. All right. Salute to all of you. Salute to our members. Salute to our chat. I'm going to get back to editing videos. I have 4 videos coming your way. One is an interview with AJ DeBonce's trainer on proprioception. That is going to be dope. We're setting that up on Sunday. Still working on the Scotty comparison video and top 50 Raptors peaks of all time and Eastern Conference, Western Conference previews. A lot of video editing ahead this week, man. I'll talk to y'all later. Please like and subscribe to these videos. Our analytics tell us that 60% of our viewers are not subscribed. So if you're one of those 60% of people, come on, man. Come on. 66 YT saying cheers, Pen. I do want to share one last thing. I apologize for the clunky end to this video. There's something I noticed, came across this morning, and they said that negativity in any capacity shrinks your brain. Negativity shrinks your brain. Positivity charges your brain. So I do have a vested interest in this community having a good day today. So I'm going to say this is 121. Whether you're watching this later or not, whatever, maybe implement this tomorrow, because tomorrow's Saturday and people generally tend to be in a better mood on Saturday. And two things that I take away from that video that were really great. One is start your day by saying, today is going to be a good day, and start looking for how to make that happen. Because again, like, there's a affirmation element to it. And at the end of your day, practice some gratitude, which is largely what went well today. Now, granted, a lot of things probably went poorly, right? When things go poorly, you're learning a lot. So that's a good thing, right? You made you may have made a mistake. Now you know not to make it, ideally, right? You might, life is never as bad as people think it is. It's never quite as good as people think it is. But I think when you start scanning your environment for things to be thankful for, you'll find them very quickly. So yes. And, the fascinating thing for me is understanding that doing that daily gratitude, daily affirmation stuff is actually helping my brain grow. It's making all those difficult things easier to do. I think that's very important. Okay. I'll talk to y'all later. Enjoy. Have a great day.